Good afternoon. Thanks so much for joining us. We'll get started in about 5 minutes, but you're welcome to take a moment and introduce yourself in the chat box if you'd like. Hi, everybody. Thanks so much for joining us. As we wait for the webinar to get started, you're welcome to add your name and role in the chat box so we can all get to know one another. Hi, everyone. We'll get started in just a moment, but you're welcome to introduce yourself in the chat box if you'd like. Hi, everyone. Good afternoon and welcome to today's webinar. I recognize some people may be joining us as they come from other meetings and calls, but we'll go ahead and get started. My name is Emily Loney. I'm a senior researcher here at American Institutes for Research. And again, thank you so much for joining us. As we get launched, please feel free to take a moment to introduce yourself in the chat box so we have a sense of who's here today. Today's webinar is Mapping the Opportunities, How Industry-Led Public-Private Partnerships Are Engaging Post-Secondary Institutions to Benefit Employers, Post-Secondary Institutions, and Students. It's sponsored by the Center for Applied Research and Post-Secondary Education at AIR with support from Walmart, and we're really excited for the presentation of our study findings as well as a great conversation. Let's move to the next slide. So just as a notice, we'll be recording this webinar and we'll be posting the webinar recording and the slides to the project website, which we'll put in the chat. So these will be available afterwards should you or any of your colleagues like to review them. I think everyone's probably very familiar with Zoom at this point, but just to orient you to a few features of this webinar, there is you can select the chat function, again, to add in your comments in the chat box. We'll be using the question and answer function in Zoom to add questions for our panelists. So as Helen or any of our panelists are talking, if there's something that you'd like to submit for our question and answer time, please go ahead and put that in the Q&A box at any point, and we'll either bring that to the panel or we can also answer it over the course of the webinar. So just as an overview of what we're hoping to cover on today's call, we'll have some opening remarks from our colleagues Alexandria Radford and Larry B. Jackson. We'll review the study findings and share the release of the new report and website. And then we'll have a panel discussion to hear from leaders that are engaged in these industry-led public-private partnerships and learn about their direct experiences and some recommendations for others who are interested in this work. We'll have a question and answer time, and then we'll wrap up. So it should be a really full and engaging hour together. So I'm pleased to present our opening set of speakers, and I'll invite them to come on camera if they'd like. First, we'll hear from Dr. Alexandria Walton Radford, who's Senior Director of AIR's Center for Applied Research in Post-Secondary Education. She has over 15 years of experience conducting quantitative and qualitative studies and evaluations on post-secondary persistence and attainment and transitions into and out of post-secondary education. And she served as the principal investigator for the study that we'll be discussing today. Next, we'll hear from Larry B. Jackson II. Larry serves as Senior Director of Opportunity. In this role, he oversees the Walmart.org Opportunity Portfolio and manages Walmart and the Walmart Foundation's philanthropic investments that aim to make significant and lasting improvements in workforce systems. His focus areas include strengthening learning paths and career navigation, improving employer hiring practices, and advancing learning records technology. Finally, we'll hear from Helen Muhasani, who's a senior researcher at AIR. Her areas of focus include post-secondary outcomes, secondary school success, and indicators of college and career readiness. And she served as the project director of the study we'll be discussing, and you'll hear from her shortly. I'm pleased to pass it over now to Alexandria, who will share some welcoming remarks.
Thank you, Emily. As Emily just said, I'm Alexandria Walton Radford, and I am the director of AIR's Center for Applied Research and Post-Secondary Education, which we call CARPE. We're delighted to have you here today for the public launch of this project. For those of you who are newer to CARPE, I'm going to provide some brief remarks on how this work fits within our larger work. Next slide. So CARPE is focused on tackling the most pressing challenges in post-secondary education. And our goal is to generate actionable insights that the field can use to implement effective solutions. One of the most pressing needs we see is fostering greater connection and coordination between post-secondary education and industry and workforce development. Doing so benefits employers, colleges, and most importantly, students. CARPE works throughout the post-secondary continuum, following students' transition into post-secondary education, through post-secondary education, and out of post-secondary education. And it's important that industry is involved throughout this continuum. And we'll discuss today how industry-led post-secondary partnerships are one way particularly medium and smaller employers can get involved. Next slide. CARPE's work has several pillars. First and foremost, we always ground our work in practice. So we have staff that have worked for and with industry-led partnerships, as well as for and with post-secondary institutions. And we brought them together and took our experience and insights from those backgrounds and infused that into our work. And that's a constant in our work. We also apply our deep research expertise, which includes collecting and analyzing qualitative and quantitative data, as we did in this project. But we also apply experimental, quasi-experimental, and other innovative methods to both our research and evaluation work. In all of this, our goal is always to build the field's capacity to improve outcomes. And we do that not just by sharing our work, but by providing technical assistance and conducting formative evaluations to help the field do so. And then you see, as that last point, we share what we discover. That's a key belief we have, that if we're really going to improve outcomes in the field, we need to get the word out there. And so we're looking to all of you to help in doing so. While you're doing that through today's webinar, you'll see more through our project website, how we hope to do so, and we'll be using other outreach methods as well. It's important to underscore that we couldn't do any of our work here at CARPE without our array of partners. Those partners include federal and state departments and agencies, post-secondary systems and institutions, national associations focused on post-secondary education, and foundations. And we're particularly grateful to Walmart for their funding and partnership in this important work. So without further ado, I'm going to turn this over to Larry so that he can share Walmart's interest in this project. Thank you, Larry.
Thank you. Hello, everyone, and thank you for having me. I'm honored to have the opportunity to share a few thoughts on this important topic of post-secondary institutions and employer collaborations. I also want to give a special shout out to Shannon Rowan on my team, who's in attendance and works on our learning paths and career navigation pillars. Thank you to AIR for your continued leadership in this space, and thanks to all of you for making it here today. Here at Walmart, as part of the Foundation's retail opportunity strategy, our mission is to create a societal system that accelerates the equitable advancement of frontline retail workers everywhere. Part of this involves ensuring all workers can access high-quality learning paths that connect across all types of learning opportunities while providing the knowledge, skills, and abilities that employers value. That's why we're excited about this recent partnership with AIR. We have a real opportunity to evolve our learning and workforce systems to meet the needs of workers and employers. In today's tight labor market, employers are seeking qualified and skilled talent to fill important roles. To this aim, we believe there's a societal benefit in having resources that demonstrate the best practices and lessons learned from partnerships between colleges and employers. This aligns with the core of our strategy, focused on bringing schools and employers together to empower workers with the skills needed to achieve greater opportunity and economic mobility. Here at Walmart, we are not only supporting partners like AIR, but many others who we believe can help build a system that truly meets the needs of our economy, and most importantly, the needs of workers who make it all possible. That is why this system will require a strong connection between education providers and employers, with the focus on skills and the ability for workers to effectively communicate those skills. I am confident that with your help, we will build a world where employers continue investing in accessible learning paths that equip workers with the in-demand skills necessary for advancement. And in doing so, we will create a future we can all be proud of. As you continue to have conversations today, I'm excited to join you on this journey. I'm excited about this partnership, and thank you all for having me here today.
Thank you so much, Larry. We very much appreciate your support for this work and are excited to share more about the study. I'll now pass it over to Helen, and she'll share with us more about the study findings and also walk us through some of the features of the new related website.
Thanks, Emily, and good afternoon, everyone. As Emily said, I'm going to discuss the key findings from the report that's being released today. Next slide. Employers and colleges must work more closely together to strengthen students' pathways through post-secondary education and into in-demand careers. Industry-led public-private partnerships have potential to build and grow these employer-college relationships, but little information is available on these partnerships and their post-secondary initiatives. This project aims to fill this gap and foster the growth of these initiatives by highlighting their features, and providing lessons and opportunities for developing, sustaining, and scaling these initiatives. Next slide. So what are industry-led public-private partnerships, post-secondary initiatives? We define these initiatives as including more than one employer and including one or more universities, community or technical colleges, and/or trade or vocational schools. The findings presented in this report stem from a literature review, interviews, and a survey. Our first set of interviews were with organizations with strong knowledge of industry-led post-secondary partnerships, such as the National Association of Workforce Boards, National Governors Association, National Skills Coalition, U.S. Chamber of Commerce Foundation, American Association of Community Colleges, and Business Higher Education Forum. The purpose of these interviews with these organizations was to further identify partnerships with post-secondary initiatives, learn more about the challenges the initiatives face in their initial development and in sustainability, and understand the characteristics of successful initiatives. We then interviewed leads such as presidents, directors, and industry council leads at 5 industry-led post-secondary partnerships, representing 5 states, which were Michigan, Colorado, Vermont, Kentucky, and Arizona. And they represented diverse industries such as healthcare, manufacturing, energy, construction, agriculture, and technology. These interviews allowed us to learn more about these partnerships initiatives and refine our survey questions. Our survey captured the key features of 23 active post-secondary initiatives run by industry-led post-secondary partnerships. These initiatives are in 10 states throughout the US. There are also 2 national initiatives highlighted. The initiatives covered in the survey began as early as 2004 and as recently as 2023, and encompass a broad range of industries, with manufacturing and healthcare the most common. We would like to thank all of the organizations and partnerships that participated in the interviews and survey, for without your participation, this study would not be possible. Next slide. So who is involved in these partnerships and their initiatives? The majority of survey respondents reported that an intermediary organization facilitated their partnership. Common intermediaries included local workforce development boards or local economic development agencies, local chambers of commerce, funders of the post-secondary initiative, or an independent entity. It was most common for initiatives to have between 11 to 25 employers involved. About 13% had fewer than 10 employers involved, and 26% had more than 50. It was also most common for initiatives to have between 1 to 4 post-secondary institutions involved. Every initiative had at least one public 2-year community college as a partner, and almost 3/4 of initiatives had a public 4-year college as a partner. In terms of the activities of the initiatives, almost all of them offered career awareness exploration activities, and nearly all provided job training and placement for potential and new employees. Working with colleges to provide activities related to upskilling and retention for current employees was less common. Next slide. The overall number of individuals who participated in the partnerships post-secondary initiatives in the prior year varied. Of the initiatives that could provide this information, 38% served 50 or fewer individuals, and 19% served more than 600 individuals. All but 4 initiatives had a specific population of focus. The most common focus populations were K-12 students, people of color, and entry-level or low-skilled workers. The survey also probed deeper into how initiatives with the focus population considered and worked with those populations. Of these initiatives, 25% served only participants from their focus populations, whereas other initiatives also engaged other populations. And of these initiatives, 43% had their populations of focus involved in developing or maintaining the initiative. Initiatives were funded by a variety of sources. 70% of the initiatives received state funding, 57% received funding from the private sector, and 43% received federal funding. Only 9% were funded solely by partnership members. Many initiatives also received in-kind support from partners, such as mentoring, coaching, and wraparound services. We want this study to help build connections between active and potential partnerships to share lessons learned. We created an interactive map so that partnerships could identify other partnerships focused on the same region, pursuing similar activities, or working in the same industry. We also created a directory of initiatives that has further details, including contact information, to help partnerships connect with and learn from each other. The report, interactive map, and directory of initiatives represented in the study are all housed at the study's website, ilpp.org. This interactive map from the website shows the count of initiatives by state that responded to our survey. You can use the first drop-down on the left to specify a state of interest, and the map will only show initiatives in that state. You can use the second drop-down on the left to see the count of initiatives with a specific industry of focus. When you select a specific industry, counts and states will only show the number of initiatives with the selected industry of focus. And the third drop-down on the left allows you to filter by initiative activities. Most states' initiatives have more than one activity. To see the count of initiatives with a certain type of activity, choose your activity of interest. This study also highlighted the need for a better documentation of return on investment in order to sustain and scale these programs. Survey respondents often had difficulty reporting the number of individuals participating in initiative activities, the extent to which participants were members of the focus populations that the initiative aimed to support, and initiative costs. Gathering metrics from employers was also a struggle. The full report discusses ways in which an independent evaluator could support growth of partnership initiatives by providing assistance in collecting and analyzing these initiative outcomes. And now, Emily, I'll turn it back to you for the panel.
Thanks so much, Helen. It's great to hear about some highlights from this work. And again, we've put a link to the website for the full study in the chat box, and you can take a more look at those maps, the interactive features, and then download a copy of the report there. With that, I'd like to invite our panel to come on video, and then I will introduce everybody before we get into our discussion. Great, and let's advance to the next slide. I'm pleased to be joined by a great panel here. We'll have a conversation together, and then we'll add in Helen for our question and answer time. I'm first pleased to introduce Nikki Da Silva. Nikki Da Silva serves as the Senior Director of Programs and Policy at the U.S. Chamber of Commerce Foundation, working to strengthen the nation's educational standards and the quality of its workforce. Her primary objective is to support the Chamber Foundation's Talent Pipeline Management Initiative by empowering employers with their data to develop sustainable talent supply chains with training and education partners that build a better workforce and better communities. Thanks for being here today, Nikki. Next, I'm pleased to introduce Deborah Majeski, who serves as the DTE Energy Center of Excellence Manager of Workforce Development. She has helped develop apprentice readiness programs for the future generation of energy workers, has created and led returning citizen programs for inmates returning to the workforce. She also serves as manager for DTE's Summer Youth Internship Program, providing transformational experiences for interns working in skilled trades or office professional roles, and oversees education grants for DTE's Human Resources Group. Thanks for joining us as well, Deborah.
Thank you.
Finally, I'm pleased to introduce Pamela Streich. Pam is Executive Director of Workforce Solutions for North Central Pennsylvania, which is one of 22 workforce development boards in Pennsylvania serving the North Central region. Pam has served on several positions in the workforce development system over the last 25 years. They bring a great perspectives and experience, and I'm really excited to have a conversation together. So first, I thought we could begin by asking Pam and Deborah to talk us more about your collaboratives. Who are involved in your core collaborations in terms of partners, and what types of students or individuals do they serve? Deborah, you want to go first?
I will go first. Thank you. What a pleasure it is to be here today and to join all of you. At DTE, we needed to really think about building a long-term strategy. We were looking at the horizon in regards to what was the workforce demand in skilled trades. And we were looking personally at what we needed to make sure that we were building a talent workforce that's going to be there for generations to come. And as we started these conversations, we said to suppliers of ours, we said, let's work together on building a long-term strategy that really brings together your needs and our needs together. And when we started trying to understand where were the gaps, we had gaps within that talent pool, the talent pool of people being able to try to pass the entry tests that are required through the Edison Electric Institute. And so many of us said, yeah, there's an opportunity. So we wanted to start with hosting this collaborative with our partners. And then our education partner was Henry Ford College. We wanted to also build a stackable credential program, one that has an approach to teaching foundational and technical skills, right? And that was going to touch on all of the demand occupations that we had with our collaborative. And our collaborative made up of 16 different organizations. So we built what's called the Power and Trade Pathway. It's a 1-year to career certificate that actually is a talent pool for the gas operations, electric operations, construction. And then on top of that, we layered the electrical engineering and technical associate degree. So we would be able to even rise and have a talent pool that really serves some of our substation groups and others that have to have a little bit more credential to get into a particular program. So when we started this partnership, right, we were saying, okay, how do we do this? We need to bring everyone together to not only provide content, but we really wanted to have a hands-on exploration portion. And so we were able to together design a learning lab that touches on people climbing poles, because apprentices need to have the core strength. We need to have people touch and work with substation equipment or electric field operations or metering, or in construction, build tiny homes. And so that's where the powerfulness of collaboration really came into play. And when we did this, and the success of it really opened our eyes, because now recently we are launching another power energy program, a power and skilled trades program on our west side of Michigan. Now, your question in regards to what populations do we serve? The programs that we're offering are going to be open to the general public, but we are doing marketing and wanting to make sure that we're touching those people that are in underserved populations, returning citizens, the people of color, veterans. So we want to make sure that they have the skills they need to be able to step up and be in that competitive light with everybody else, because those jobs are not just 1-2 people applying. There are thousands at times that are applying. So we want to do what we can to help them. And lastly, I'll just add, we saw that was our long-term strategy, but we also had to look at how do we move now and make a short-term strategy. And we built what's called a readiness workshop. And that is where in a very short time frame, we look at particular job roles that need to get filled. We go out to targeted organizations to say, we need this type of diverse population to be invited in if there's interest. And we take them through a preparation that helps them be ready to be able to have greater success through the application process.
Thanks so much, Deborah. Pam,
You're
you want to tell
welcome.
us a little bit more about your program?
Sure. Good afternoon, everyone. Very happy to be here. And I love hearing about your partnership, Deborah. It's very comprehensive. So I represent a rural area, and the partnership that I'm going to share a little bit about today started probably over a decade ago. I do just want to say that any workforce development board, and I speak for everyone in Pennsylvania and probably across the country, that we have multiple partnerships going on between post-secondary and employers. As a workforce board, that is definitely one of the roles we're charged with. But probably about 10 years ago, we've maintained a manufacturing industry partnership in our region for about 15 years, I'd say. And so they're employer driven. And during, I think it was 2015 or 16, actually, employers were really struggling to find skilled die setters. And so in our region, we have a manufacturing niche known as powdered metal. We've often been referred to the powdered metal company of the world. I don't know if that's still what we're called, but we like to call ourselves that. And so these die setters were hard to find. So we worked with a group of employers as well as one local post-secondary provider, which would have been Penn State University Du Bois campus. The employers led the conversation. We brought them together, learned more about the skills a die setter might need for entry level. But we targeted first the incumbent workers to help the employers move their current employees into these positions. So the employers led the discussion the whole way through. The provider really, we brought them together as a workforce board, but the provider really developed the curriculum with industry input the whole way through. We had toured many companies, talked to many employers. Our role was, again, bringing them together and securing funding, quite honestly, to help with the curriculum development and to sustain that training program. I guess the next part would be, we then were transitioning to offer it to job seekers that had some manufacturing experience. And so far we've trained quite a few in that only this past year, but now we're having conversations to develop this into a registered apprenticeship. So the partnership continues that started over a decade ago.
Great. Thanks so much for sharing. Now I'd love to pass it over to you, Nikki. I know you bring a kind of wider lens with your work with the U.S. Chamber of Commerce Foundation. I'm wondering if you could tell us a little bit more about your work with them and kind of your lens on this landscape.
Sure. So good afternoon, everyone. At the Chamber Foundation, we work with local and state chambers of commerce and businesses, education institutions kind of all over the US, really focused on developing these employer-led partnerships. We call them employer collaboratives. And Deborah's organization actually is a part of some of the work she's talking about. It is somewhat related to some of those employer-led collaboratives, but we see this as really critical to addressing a lot of the workforce challenges that we're seeing across the US. In many cases, we put a lot of the onus on the education system to come up with solutions for what are traditionally and truly employer problems, right? So this is an opportunity for employers to really get a true understanding of what their needs are and an effective way to communicate that through a common language to their education and training partners so they can respond effectively, right? Imagine that you are an education provider in a community, say in Michigan, right? And you have 15 different employers telling you 15 different things about one program. How do you know what to prioritize, right? And then as employers, we get frustrated that we're not getting the talent that we're looking for. Well, we haven't done a good job of communicating what we need. And so this is really a true opportunity to build that space for employers to understand how to identify their needs and communicate that in an aligned way with those education partners. And so we've seen it be really effective to have a data-driven approach that really hits home on what the true pain points are. Hopefully that's a good segue.
Yeah, definitely. Pam and Deborah, you both kind of reference some of the partners who have been involved with these, but I'm wondering if you can tell us more about their kind of roles, both in kind of launching these partnerships, but then how have employers and your post-secondary partners played roles in sustaining these programs over time?
And get started on that a little bit. Of course, with the way the economy changes, and then with the pandemic, the roles definitely change. You bring in new partners. But for the most part, the employers have to always be at the at the center of what we're doing. So we always have to listen to their changing needs. And our program, with the help of Penn State University, it's really become their program. We've brought everyone together, and we continue to support it through additional funding. But they've really been able to adapt to the changing workforce needs. So I think it's crucial that that role, that we allow for that flexibility of the post-secondary providers.
From a DTE perspective, or when we were looking at partnering with the Henry Ford College, we said we really did some homework on that on the front end first, right? We wanted to make sure that we were able to sustain, because we don't want to bring a whole collaborative together and make this full investment and then also take foundation dollars or federal dollars and stand up a program and then not have it be sustainable. So we said, we wanted to make sure that we were able to prepare candidates for employment opportunities. So if we can show and prove the employment opportunities, that's going to drive part of that career success. We want to also make it be a very attractive opportunity for when we're doing career fairs. And we have established those advisory board meetings that help us bring together those suppliers or those partners of that collaborative to say what's working well and what's not working well. So it's our opportunity to seek improvements, and also to say, where do we need to put more focus? So we want to try to keep the employers engaged that way. When we do career fairs, we're bringing them to the table with us. So it's not just one career fair with DTE, it is a career fair with many of the collaboratives. So that really has helped drive us that sustainability and credibility, if I may. And then from an employer perspective, they wanted to really make sure that they were having that job specific training needs. So they worked together for us to really come up with what were those exploration opportunities that were being showcased for their companies and for them to sell their jobs to people, the same with us. So that was just another area of opportunity for us to be able to draw on that sustainability.
And Nikki, again, kind of giving you a bigger view, have you seen either any trends or patterns, or kind of what do you think about in terms of both launching and sustaining these programs as it comes to post-secondary and employer partners?
Yeah, as far as trends for kind of getting started or sustaining this work, and it might sound like we've all kind of said this already, and it's in the name of even the webinar today, but the importance of keeping employers engaged in this process. And one of the ways to do that is by really ensuring that all of the activities that you're doing throughout your time together are focused on your North Star. And when I say your North Star, is what is the pain point that brought everybody to the table to begin with, right? What are you trying to solve? And sometimes when we bring together groups of people, we end up talking about a lot of different things because there are a lot of different problems, right? But it's really focusing in on what is the true critical pain point that's going to stop either the business from being able to move forward and be successful, from people being able to get into jobs. What is that major pain point that everybody's agreed upon? And what are the goals associated with that, right? So are you collecting the right type of data along the line, and are you moving the needle towards achieving those goals that will eventually get you kind of what we call return on investment, right? And that return on investment can be a monetary component, or it could be something else, right? You see higher graduation rates, sustained in employee engagement, lower turnover, career advancement. There are a lot of things that can come out of that, but if you don't have the focus and that continued focus towards your true goal, you start to see people kind of drop off. So it has to be really action oriented towards a goal. That's kind of the number one thing for sustainment. As far as getting started, and I hope I'm not going out of line, because I think this might address one of the Q&A questions we got around where do you start with something like, they called it unskilled labor. I would maybe challenge that phrasing a little bit, but it's understanding, who are the employers that are ready and willing to do this work. You might know that there are some industries in the community that really desperately need to do something with this, but if you don't have the key stakeholders who are willing to engage in it right now, it doesn't matter. So you have to think, sometimes it's start small with who you know and who's ready to do this and work together, and build from that piece. So go with what you know, and go with who will go with you. And that's kind of typically where we encourage people to start.
Nikki mentioned data, and I'm wondering, Pam and Deborah, what kind of data you're looking at, especially as it relates to outcomes. What have you seen in terms of the outcomes for your participants and your employers?
Well, for the Powered Trade Pathway program, we started in 2018 with the pilot. And we were drawn to great success with our pilot group because we were able to leverage federal dollars through the U.S. It was the Apprenticeship USA grant. And so we were able to fund the pilot group to go through the program. So we were able to take summer interns from DTE, educate them on this opportunity, put them through this program, through a funded program, and then we were able to do employment thereafter. So, but then we hit COVID, right? We had the pandemic and we were paused for about 2 years of really being able to do the exploration portion of it. But since then, we've had 200 and I think 318 that have graduated through the program, and well over 250 that have completed, have a level of employment. They say that there's 76% through a survey that received employment. Now, that's the hardest part right there, is trying to find out what is that success rate, because unless we have a connection with that student, we cannot find that out. So we have to ask our employers, right? So we surveyed through the college. They did the survey for us to try to canvass where were we at with the success rate. But we don't have the ability to reach out to those students directly, unfortunately.
And I will add, we're fortunate a little bit in that we're currently serving incumbent workers. So if they apply for funding, because that's another way we do sustain it through some of our Workforce Innovation Opportunity Act dollars, if they apply for it, there's certain requirements, and we have developed a tracking form where anyone who's in the training, they have to provide us with their wage start prior to the training, wage after the training. And then we do try to follow up retention for at least a year to see if they're still working. We'll run into those challenges of not having access to the students once we start opening it up, but through the PA Career Link and our workforce partners, we'll be able to track that. But the data that started everything, we've looked at wage data, annual openings, and then just looking at the wage prior to the training and after, because we do sometimes require that increase depending on the funding stream we're using, and then that retention rate that we can track easily for the incumbent workers. But data plays a role in everything we do, for sure.
Yeah, Emily, too, I'll just like to mention with our readiness workshops, we've ran 13 of those since 2019. So we've had 395 participants that went through the program, 284 successfully completed. So that's 72%. So that's really preparing the community, the people, for those jobs, in the skilled trades energy industry. So we're looking at that as being a successful point. So yes.
Thanks so much for sharing those. Nikki, I was wondering if you had any additional thoughts about kind of characteristics or conditions that just help these initiatives we talked about launching and sustaining. You mentioned some factors, but I'm wondering if there are other things you would want to call out for people just to be thinking about, kind of what are some of the factors that really help to scaffold and support the success of these types of partnerships? Yeah,
some of the things that we typically talk to people when they come to us and they're like, we're really interested in this. How do we get started? Some of the things we first start with is, do you have an understanding of the current landscape? And I don't just mean, what you think but what's truly out there as far as evidence to support what you think are the problems, but then also who in your community is working on this, right? And how do they fit into, if you're building kind of your own, we call them talent supply chains, right? Who are all the different players in this field, in this workforce space or in the industry space, and what are they doing, right? And is there a way to align that? Because part of it is, as you're moving forward, you're thinking, oh, how am I going to bring together a group of employers around this? Well, if there's somebody in your community who's naturally convening employers already, is there an opportunity to partner with them, right? And go where the employers already are? Or if, maybe there's somebody who their entire job is to do research on workforce in your community, right? can you partner with them to get some data around some of the challenges that you think that you're seeing? So really having that understanding of the landscape from the problem perspective, the landscape from the partner perspective. And on that same note, it's identifying who those key champions are going to be and the strength of the partnerships you currently have, because you might actually need to do some work on developing some deep relationships before you can get started on some of the other activities that you want to do.
So much. Now I thought we could kind of talk about maybe some of the challenges that relate to these. It sounds like, there's been great success, but we know that, I mean, you just both mentioned the pandemic. Sometimes there's really unexpected or even other factors that come into place. So I'm wondering, for all three of you, what do you see as kind of the biggest need for improving and expanding these types of post-secondary initiatives?
What I have seen for us is, one is making sure that you can get the expert instructors, right? We want to find that right resource that's going to teach that population of students. And that's been a challenge for us at times, depending on the particular job. We have a retiree alumni group that we actually tapped into at DTE to really help Henry Ford College. So we had a great opportunity there to leverage. But again, you have people, who are going to be at an age that may not want to climb poles. And so we have to make sure that we're finding that right talent, number one, that's going to be able to deliver that content that we're really feeling to be the most important. Second is, how do you really market the program? When you're working with a post-secondary and they have general programs, they're not going to take and market every single one of those programs. They're out there going to the general public. So we as a collaborative are trying to help market where those opportunities are with this particular program. 1 year to a career, making sure that the collaborative is adding it as a preferred credential. So that's going to drive more greater success and we can market and advertise that. So doing press releases and social media, we've saw that we've had to move into that space in order to continue that sustainability.
And I would add for us, our challenges definitely related more to the pandemic when, no one could come together. That I mentioned flexibility earlier, and that's the most important part. And we're fortunate in this aspect, being in a rural area. Our training provider was able to continue offering the training, but take it to specific employers. So if an employer wanted to train 5 people, they were able then to take that, employer-driven ready curriculum to the employer. And the other thing during the pandemic that we've learned is, of course, they aren't able to take people off the floor to go to training. We're starting to see that change. So it was really important to be able to do that, to continue the training program if they weren't able to send multiple people from multiple companies to this training. So I think that was our greatest challenge, but fortunately, we were able to adapt well, I would say to that. It wasn't like everybody, that was the first thing that employers wanted, was to continue training during the pandemic. It took some time, but we were able to continue it somewhat.
And then, Nikki, again, kind of what are you seeing as some of kind of the needs as it relates to like trying to improve or even just scale and expand the number of these types of initiatives?
Yeah, I think the number one thing typically is, time and resources, right? And for most organizations, like, and from this, particularly from the employer perspective, it's thinking about the now, right? Like, what do I need to do right now? But a lot of this work is embedded in systematic change. And I think even Carrie's question about, well, what do we do once we get the people in, right? Or how are we continuing to build these employment practices? And talent pipeline management is a framework that's really meant to be able to look at the more holistic view of how you're doing this. But it takes time and willingness to put the time in on the front end. Deborah can tell you that it doesn't happen overnight. And it's a continuous process. But once you start to build in the infrastructure, then it does become easier, right? Then it can be replicated. Then you can make the refinements around, okay, now we need to look at it really focused on, well, we addressed this problem, but we didn't address our diversity issues, or we need to look at the, Carrie mentioned job quality in her question, right? Like, how are we making sure that these are high quality jobs, and the way that we're writing them on the front end is meeting the expectations for somebody when they're coming into that role. What does our pipeline internally look like for career advancement? And how are we, naturally embedding those things into it? So it's both, from the operational standpoint, as well as, getting these partnerships started. So I think those are important pieces. So really, it's being able to make the commitment of time, of recognizing what the positive impact of doing this work can be. Probably like the biggest challenge for most people and most organizations in getting started.
We had a question come in the chat that I thought was really interesting. In addition to helping to ensure training needs to meet industry partners, are any of your partnerships, or I guess for Nikki, are you aware of any partnerships that are helping employers implement improved employment practices? So potentially things related to more inclusive hiring practices and other improvements to the job quality once folks are hired. Does that resonate, or have you seen that in your work?
Yeah, absolutely. There's a little bit of what I was alluding to in my previous comments, but within the talent pipeline management framework. So it's a framework, a methodology which you can be trained in, similar to, if anyone's familiar with Scrum or design thinking or Lean Six Sigma, you take any sort of supply chain management operational process. This is another way of thinking, very specific to talent challenges and human capital, right? You can focus that in, and we have content that focuses very specifically on opportunity talent, on job quality, on CTE and career pathways, right? So if you know that I want to be able to rebuild this structure, but I need to really focus in on these particular components of it too, we do that, I guess is what I'm saying. So yes, I do know of people doing that. Some examples of that in practice, I would say even with Deborah's collaborative and looking at the career readiness workshops, they recognized they were able to fill all the open positions they had. So they kind of addressed that first problem, but then, their workforce still wasn't reflective of the communities necessarily that they were working in. So why was that happening? And I don't want to steal her thunder, so I'll let her share what that looks like. Another example is in Kentucky, in the equine industry. Shocker that equine is a big economic driver in Kentucky, right? But their correctional facilities had these programs for horse within the equine industry for training and maintaining horses. They had zero connection to employment once somebody left their time in the correctional facility. You had employers in the equine industry that were struggling to find people because it's a very familial industry, and a lot of people are leaving it. Same with agriculture and other similar type familial industries. Well, they were able to have an employer collaborative come together, identify what the critical jobs were that they needed, and realign to be able to help build out that program. So now the employers are providing mock interviews and support, helping with the wraparound services to make sure that once people leave their time in the criminal justice system, right, that they're leaving with the skill sets they need to be qualified and potentially already have a job connected to employers in the community, right? So it's meeting the needs of employers, meeting the needs of workers, and also kind of addressing the potential for recidivism by ensuring that we're connecting an opportunity population with employment. So.
That's great. Thanks, Nikki. Pam or Deborah, did you want to comment on that? Is there anything that resonated from that question for you?
Oh, go ahead, Deborah.
No, please go ahead. No, go ahead.
I'll be brief. It doesn't really have to do with the partnership I highlighted today, but we do maintain, as I said, industry partnerships. And we have just groups of employers coming together and sharing their best practices of what they do. And from that, the other employers have really been able to adopt some successful, simple practices and have really provided solutions to their various HR issues. So we really are the convener and the connector, but they're learning from each other in that partnership that we have. Go ahead, Deborah. Sorry about that.
No, I would just like to echo, what Nikki was talking about. Part of that talent pipeline management training that they do offer through the U.S. Chamber is extremely powerful. It's that power of learning, how do you really run a collaborative, right? And how can you use that? And it just doesn't need to be for that post-secondary topic that we're talking about today, that we have used it multiple times now within our region in Southeastern Michigan or West Michigan for building a lot of different collaboratives, if it's even internal. So it's internal collaboration with our business units, because now you really do need to have those open dialogues. You're using tools that you never knew to use, and that drives that conversation, that drives that opportunity. And so when you're doing that also with external partners, it helps also for that success for the future, because you start really talking about those pain points that were talked about earlier, right? And that is needed for us to be able to grow as an organization, to grow as building talent pipelines as are needed. Now that we're starting to get into a more lean mode across the US, how are we going to do that smarter, right? And so we really need to have an understanding there.
Thanks, everybody. I'm going to invite Helen to come on video. We've kind of moved into the Q&A time, but I'll make sure she's brought into this conversation. We can advance the slide. Attendees, please do continue to put your questions in the Q&A box in Zoom. We'll keep the conversation moving forward. One other question I thought we could talk about were how can other groups, policymakers and funders best support these initiatives? We saw in our study that there were a variety of types of ways that these are being funded, and we know how they're set up can vary, but kind of how have you seen your roles, or kind of what would you recommend to others about how policymakers and funders could help scaffold and support these?
I can start on that one. For what I've seen, it is really about trying to find those funds that are out there, both state and federal, that can help any type of program that you're trying to stand up and launch with an education partner. So as we talked about the Apprenticeship USA State Apprenticeship Grant that was there available for us to actually use to bring someone through a particular program to really set them up for success, that truly was a mark of improvement, right? We've looked at other grants that we've leveraged along our journey, but at the same time, there's not often a lot of funding that's out there for the participant. And so we've got different tuition reimbursement programs maybe internally, but when you look externally, you have your FAST for Detroit Promise dollars, things like that. We just want to make sure that the policymakers, the funders that are out there can help us provide more funding to help these people who need to go through and gain credentials. So their cost is less, if I may, because it's going to grow the talent for themselves, but also help us as an industry.
I would just add, as I had said before, that flexibility is key. And the American Job Centers across the country, there's not many, but there's funding opportunities for eligible job seekers. And they do have a priority of service policy. Many of the programs, of course, serve the underserved. And so we have been successful in leveraging that funding, mainly because we're the fiscal agent, so we have funding for the incumbent worker, and now as we transition, we have to make sure that that training is eligible for assistance through the Workforce Innovation Opportunity Act. And then when people go and utilize the American Job Center services, they're able to get some assistance.
And Emily, one thing that we did find through our interviews is that a lot of people talked about not also having funding for the initiative, but funding just for maintaining the partnership as well, because there's a lot of work that goes into building those coalitions, and there's very little funding to do that. So that type of funding is needed for that work.
Yeah. Go ahead, Nikki.
Sorry, I would just say, when it comes to kind of employer-led or industry-led partnerships, I actually think we're probably in the best time for funding that we ever have been as a country, right? There's so much workforce money out there, and even more that is coming out through things like the CHIPS Act. So there's a lot of dollars circulating around. It's really about being able to identify kind of which pools of money work best and how you can effectively bring together partners so we're not continuing to build silos of people trying to work on the same things, but how are we truly all working together? And just wanted to point out one thing I put in the chat. If you are looking at, even kind of that realignment of employee and education benefits and what that looks like, kind of to some of Deborah's points, we have a whole body of work that looks at that alignment. It's called talent finance. So I just popped that in the chat as well. We don't have enough time to cover that as a topic right now.
So Emily, if I could just add too, there really needs to be a connection and maybe some funding that goes to the secondary organizations, because what we're trying to leverage installing of programs that will articulate to post-secondary. And so if we really want to target the youth, we really need to start there and make sure that the schools have the funding to allow these programs to launch within that high school, to then they articulate to the colleges and they get that credit. So that will drive a positive momentum, but I just think that's an opportunity too.
Great. I think we're close at time. And so I think with that, I'd love to just share my thanks, maybe a virtual round of applause from our audience for this great conversation. I think it's really inspiring and meaningful to just hear about these efforts across the country. I really even appreciate the Kentucky example, just hearing about these really unique industries, but also really common, energy and investment in different communities to really just connect different communities and opportunities. So thank you, Pam, Deborah, Nikki, Helen, for your comments today. Just like to thank all of you who have attended today's webinar, with a reminder to look at our report website if you'd like to read the full report that Helen highlighted and explore the map. We also, if you're interested in hearing more about AIR's post-secondary projects, we'd encourage you to visit our CARPE website. On that website, you can also subscribe to our newsletter if you're not yet, just to be in touch about other resources and events just like this. So with that, I'd like to thank everyone. Thank you for you who have attended. We'll send a follow-up email once this material is archived on the website so that you can share it with your colleagues. Thanks everybody once again, and we wish you a good afternoon.